let's go ahead and get into the introductions. If you guys have joined the webinars before, heard the podcasts, you guys do know who I am. Kyle Flynn, the Platinum Account Manager here at Voices. The pleasure of working with likely many of you in attendance, as well as all of our coaching partners, including Anthony here, who is our monthly guest. So with that said, let's go ahead and introduce Anthony. So after a lifetime of working in voiceover, broadcasting, animation, gaming, production, music, media, I mean, you name it, entertainment, he's done it all. So the bio of Anthony is vast, very comprehensive, to say the least. And Anthony has kind of been there, done that on all aspects of the industry. So very knowledgeable expert, very esteemed in the community. And it is our pleasure to welcome him here today. So Anthony, thank you very much for spending the time with us here.
Oh, thank you very much. You know, that was a great introduction. I feel like I should be flicking a Bic or something here, man. Yellow Zeppelin. Very good. Thank you very much. And Kyle, I want to say also to you and Vanessa and Stephanie and David and everybody, I know what you guys are trying to accomplish, and I appreciate everything you do for us talent out there. There's a lot of talent here to take advantage of what I'm about to offer and what you guys do on a regular basis. So thank you very much. Salute to you guys as well for everything you do for our community.
Hey, we're in it together. We're all part of the fight to better educate and provide resources for the community as a whole, in hopes of helping everybody along the journey. With so much information out there, sometimes it can be a sea and hard to navigate, but we hope that you guys can view this session and have some good takeaways to bring into your daily work practice.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So with that said, let's go ahead and kind of jump into the meat and potatoes of today's discussion, which is the 6 types of narration. The main objection is, kind of understanding these 6 primary narration delivery types. Where are they applicable? When are they applicable? Kind of diving into that. Let's have you lead the conversation there and let's get into it.
Like I was taught and directed back in the hairband days when I first got into this business and radio, I sponged a lot of information off really good narrative producers, guys and girls that were really good, and they had a lot of insight into what made or will make or break a talent in the narrative world. So I've learned over the years to break them down into these 6 primary narrative styles that we'll talk about. The very first style that I teach and I keep people to understand is what's considered generally a technical type of read. The technical read, let me put on my glasses because I'm pretty much blind. The technical read is typically more business and corporate, like it says on the paper, if any of you are following along. If not, feel free to reach out to the paper. Usually it's found in the medical, industrial type stuff, training projects, things that are technical, pharmaceutical, clinician stuff, clinical, anything that is really corporate business. One of my clients in the past, Waterpik, for example, or Oracle, those are companies in OSHA. These are companies that I've worked with and done stuff over the years that like a very cold, you can kind of think of it as a laboratory, using my friends over the pond statement, laboratory, white coat type of laboratory feel. The approach is typically a little bit more matter of fact. It's a little bit more business. An example would be something like, there is a natural progression of skills from the ATV level to the ASE. A little bit more proper, a little bit more business, a little bit more corporate sounding. You mold the voice, you add a little boldness, you create a little bit more of a polished, bolder sound. And that helps to deliver the technical type of read. Technical read is a whole different sound. So in other words, the idea here is if you develop a sound for each one of these subgenres, you end up basically with 6 narrative sounds instead of the one that you try to figure out, how do I make my sound fit whatever? You already know when you read the project and the project, you go, oh, yep, this is technical. You go right to your closet and you get your technical voice out and you bring that to the booth. And now you're thinking in terms of that soundscape, that sound pack. is now the technical approach to your project because it fits that particular project. When you're no longer doing the technical type of read and you run into a project that is an audiobook, the sky's the limit with regards to audiobooks. You know, the thing about audiobooks is there is no boundary. Audiobooks allow us to basically go all over the place. Let's face it, what audiobooks are about: storytelling, painting a picture, taking them on adventure, having them escape, allowing them, the consumer, to basically go where we want them to go. We are the actor. We are the play. We are the orchestra. We are everything. Nowadays, audiobooks are starting to slowly develop radio drama type of audiobooks where they're bringing in cast and characters and they're throwing a little more music in, a little more production value. But the reality is most of the stuff has an intro music bed and a quick, intro into the voiceover narrative. And a good narrator these days must be able to deliver the story. Remember what they say, the slogan they were playing with for a few years there was, it's all about the performance. Well, it's true. All voiceover is but the reality is in audiobooks, it's a whole different narrative in itself. It's the second subgenre. It allows us to basically rely upon not only our narration sound, but our acting. It's like characters. Character genre is totally reliant upon our ability to deliver deliver good dialogue and good lines and create original animated voices or non-animated voices and all that. Same thing happens in the audiobook. I know a lot of people who have come to me and said, I've been going after ACX projects for a year and I've done 1,000 zillion auditions and I've never landed an audiobook, even though I'm willing to do a stipend or I'm willing to do a production only split or whatever. And the reason is when I sit and I listen, the 6, 7, 8 samples they send me are all the same. They have a love novel, mystery, thriller, romance, musical, autobiographical, war, historical. And I listen to them and I go, but they all sound like they're pretty much the same. The difference is in audiobooks, we got to allow ourselves to be able to develop a story, if you will, using the Disney term, phantasm type of fantastic sound, where our job is to take the consumer somewhere. Unlike the technical read, an audiobook, we are allowed to literally, as the hippie might say, let our hair down. We're able to actually play with more than just a narrative sound that we've created for that particular book and that project, but we're allowed to actually go wherever we want. And usually, ear candy, the author is much happier when we develop the story, when we tell the story. For example, in an audiobook sample, unlike the technical, which is very corporate and cold and calculated, we want to deliver an audiobook, for example, something along Upload a Vampire, Moon, Chased, with that really dramatic type of Upload a Vampire, Moon, chased all life from the color of the world or whatever. Allow ourselves to basically use the time restraint to our advantage. There is none. In corporate technical stuff, we're limited to typically like broadcast. In audiobooks, we're really not limited. We're pretty much allowed to take our time, be more dramatic, speed up when we need to, but slow down so it creates that tension, that drama, and that feel. Allow the consumer to be on the edge of their chair, literally. I don't care if they're at a soccer game, sitting by the pool, where they are, commuting on the highway, doing 10 miles an hour on the interstate every morning for 2 hours. We take them somewhere. And that is what is different about audiobook, the second subgenre. It's one of those genres that we're allowed to pretty much go wherever we choose to. But it still has to be professional. It still has to be delivered how the author and the producers and everybody collaboratively thinks about what we want the narrative sound to be, what do the characters' spin-off voices be, what are we able to do with our overall read so there's continuity and consistency over the 4, 5, 6, 8 hours of the book. So that subgenre, I think, is a subgenre that people limit themselves too much for. So that's kind of the second approach to the narrative type of stuff. You have your technical read, then you put your hat on, you go, I get to now do a audiobook read, and there's no limit. So that's kind of the first two. The third one is the promotional. The promotional read is literally a read that we use to basically a little bit more of an overall magical escape. Our idea is to take the consumer to the point of where they feel like we call it in the broadcast world a call to action. In the promotional type of delivery, the tone, the package, the sound, the delivery is more dramatic. It's a little bit more, unlike an audiobook or technical read, it's a little bit more of a sales pitch in a way. We're not necessarily commercializing it, but because it falls under narration, but it's typically a long form, several minute promotional piece. It's sell Disney resorts, Sandals beaches, Carnival Cruise Line, Viking Cruise Line. You can start to think of longer form commercial deliveries without the sales or manipulation trying to call them to action from a standpoint of using the pitch. We're basically using the overall drama, the overall escapism, the overall feeling. You know, like for an example, a piece might be discover the many faces of China on this fascinating 16-day Viking river cruise adventure. We're throwing our voice a little bit over the top. You know, in the business, some people may call that, well, we're being a little pukey. We're being a little bit more dramatic. We're overacting, as Jim Carrey gets accused of a lot. Yes, we really are. That's the point of the promotional narrative. The promotional narrative needs to be a little bit more over the top. The sound, the visual, the build, the components, the mix will upstage us. It'll blow us away. If you're looking at these Himalaya mountain scenes and these incredible skylines, and you better step up and be able to match that. And so the idea is, in order to get hired and in order to represent a promotional piece, your narrative hat that you've put on has to allow you to remember, my job is to make a consumer want to take a trip of a lifetime. Even if it's $18,000, we want them to make that Viking River cruise their bucket list number 3 or number 2 or whatever, right? The technical read, cold, calculated, business, corporate sounding, stiffer, a little bit more matter of fact. The overall feel we build is that. Audiobook is based upon project. You may have one audiobook sound, the next sound that you do is a completely different feel depending on what the content of the book is. But when you get the promotional piece is developed in order for us to make the consumer take action without selling them, but using that escape, that magical, that fantastic, that expressive color in our voice, so that they will want to, what we call basically part with their pocketbook. I hate to say that, but the idea is for them to write a check. And if we've done our job and the client starts to say ding, 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 and start booking, and all of a sudden reservations are being made and the pieces ran for 4 days, and all of a sudden they're selling out cruises or they're selling out vacation package at Disney, you've got a potentially long-term gig. If they have no results, you're in trouble and you won't be hired back. Because when you created the sound package, the soundscape, the narrative package for that a particular project, you didn't deliver the goods. So the third one, the promotional piece, is a much more dramatic, a little bit over the top, unless the client says otherwise. When you're auditioning, which is that first shot, you want to be a little bit more over the top, a little bit more fantastic. You know, enjoy many faces of China. You know, want to, wow. You're creating that fantasy that, you can, flip through and see the voices that are cast. I'm involved in a lot of co-casting as well as casting, and I critique a lot of people's casts that they pick. And I think we're familiar with one of the sites they do that, and they send me their finalists to say, which one do you think's the best out of these 10? A lot of times I'm looking for that talent that brings that extra something. We call it the X factor. That's what the promotional piece does. That's the whole idea of developing a promotional narrative style. The fourth one, kind of quicker, is the educational. We've all done educational pieces. Educational pieces are much more of a friendlier, casualer. You're talking to them. You're not talking down to them. You're not trying to sell them. It's much more casual, much more conversational. You're talking to college students. You're talking to long distance learners. You're talking to people that get certified. You're talking to anybody who basically needs to be informed. So our sound that we deliver for that educational narrative subgenre has to be exactly that. Much more approachable, friendly, relatable, user-friendly, confident, so they believe we're competent at what we're reading. That's one of the biggest things that I run into when I'm doing an educational piece is, are you truly competent sounding? What does that mean? Confidence and competence can't live without one another. You can't be competent, to me as the consumer, meaning if you're not confident what you're reading is. A lot of people will read technical stuff and you can tell they are going through the words. They don't really, what trigonometry, if you don't know it, then you've got to learn it before you deliver the goods. You better spend some time and find out so that you sound like you know how to pronounce the words right and you know what you're saying. The person, the guy or the girl or the person who is studying mechanical engineering will know in a heartbeat if you know what you're talking about. Why? It's the competence and of the confident in your voice. If you don't sound confident, they're never going to believe they can trust you know what you're talking about. So why would they listen? And they aren't going to retain what you're delivering them. If they don't believe you, you can't educate me. Learning how to become an educational narrator is much more conversational, much more friendly, much more relaxed, much more relatable. You're talking to them. You're not selling them. You're not talking down on them. You're not belittling them or whatever other words I could use as an example. You're kind of being, their friend, their mentor, but yet you got to be relatable. And it's a whole different sound. Yeah.
I think mentor is a great word there. And I also love the confidence and competence.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of, narrow such, broad, kind of genre there, as there's so many different educational purposes.
Exactly right.
To, say exactly, you are a peer still. You are, their confidant or their mentor or whatever it might be.
Right.
But you are also teaching them and showing them the way. So confident.
Very much so. It's kind of in a way, you're informing them while you're educating them at the same time. And if to wrap up on that, if you deliver a good educational piece, they retain the information. And then you have a successful A+ student who stays tuned in. If you don't sound confident, competent, you're not delivering a good quality sound that they can relate to, and it's educational, they're going to tune out. They're going to fast forward, get to the end of the thing, take their final quiz or whatever. So
I think that's a great
four so far. The fifth one is the explainer.
I was going to say great segue to explainer there.
Explainers are, if you've ever done imaging work, any of you out there watching and listening, imaging for station imaging, branding, radio, TV, podcast, whatever, we basically create imaging a little bit more like their stabs, their individual statements. You're listening to the best in oldies. More great music on the way. Today's best music mixed with hits of yesterday. These are all individual stabs that the producer then builds into a final mix with sound bites and music bites and clips and testimonials and fans and whatever, right? The same thing happens in explainers. Explainers and how-tos are typically sent over in a paragraph or a script format. I typically see when an explainer video is being developed for growing avocados, for example, or whatever have you here, then ultimately I break those down as it's a paragraph, but I go through and I hit enter, 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 and I make them into one-line statements. And the reason is usually explainers are, today we're going to learn how to change the oil on a Harley Davidson motorcycle. First, clear the room in your garage. You put down a drop stick or drop blanket. Next, you're going to need the following tools, this, that, this, that. Now, see, they're all individual commands. They're individual tasks, even though it's written in a paragraph form or a copy or script or manuscript or even a manual. I've had mailed where they send a manual and we have to scan the pages, and that's what the talent ends up getting, is a scanned manual. But the reality is, typically YouTube and other streaming media, voice talent who don't understand how to approach explainers, they read it like it's being read as a paragraph. You know, today we're going to learn how to change the oil in your Harley. First, drop a cloth in your garage. Next, make sure you put the dogs away. Third, watch out for where you're going to put the oil, because oils can be hazardous to your pets. It's like a paragraph. They're not meant to be read that way.
Makes it less consumable as well.
Exactly.
When you have to follow the instructions step by step, makes it less consumable because they're trying to catch up to you.
That's exactly right. You said it very good. Exactly, Matt. And you know, the reality is you got to give them time to retain. You got to give them time to see the visual. You got to give them time to basically stay, like you talked about, in your shadow. And I'm a big believer in this natural stalls and pauses and tempos and paces, so you don't pull away from them. You ever follow somebody on the highway, like I talked about on the podcast, and you hit a light and they make the light, and they got to pull over and wait for you to catch up. That's kind of an analogy of what I'm talking about, a visual. If you are the narrator and you're narrating an explainer video with someone, you got to allow that person to stay with you. First, grab the wrenches and make sure not to drop anything. Second, open up the case and take out all the parts you're going to need that are supplied in the box. Next, blah, 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 blah. Same thing with telephone prompts, right? When we do telephone packages, we're doing on-hold bullets or individual bullets. When we're doing a prompt, thanks for calling Bob's Automotive. For sales, press 1. For repairs, press 2. For reservations, press 3. We give them that beat, that stall. Same thing happens in explainers. You may have your opening paragraph that introduces them, but when it comes down to the actual tasks, they should be delivered as one-offs or statements or bullets, I call them. So they should have an inflection and a sound as such. So the difference between the technical is corporate business, all about just the facts, man. Audiobooks, there's really no boundaries. The key is paint that, be the theater for them, be the overall acting component. Allow them to get lost in your story. The third one, promotional, make sure that they feel like they can't wait to go on their next cruise. You want them to desire, lust for the product you're promoting. And the educational piece, as we discussed, the explainer piece, as we discussed, brings us to a documentary read. A documentary read, which is one of the most popular, it's one of the most competitive too, because everybody wants to do documentaries, because it can turn into a 26-week, like Robert Clockworthy, 9-year, 10-year job that is all you ever have to do in your life. Skinwalker Ranch
of the next generation everyone's looking for.
I'm telling you, right, man. But the reality is, it's a specialty. You got to be able to really develop and deliver a good documentary style. A lot of people don't understand that there's a certain approach to that documentary sound. There's a certain flavor. There's a certain cadence. There's a certain stab type of feel to that as well. If you've ever seen Robert Clockworthy from Ancient Aliens, I use him as an example a lot for people, as a male example, if you will. According to ancient alien theorists, Earth has been visited for eons. They think that everything's kind of a stab, but he keeps himself, what I call the monotone, deadpan, the flatter, controlled musically. I teach it as white in my color exercise. It's a non-musically alive, white, monotone, deadpan delivery that he uses. When you think of drama and you think of any of the, I don't care if you go to Disney World and go through the ball in Epcot, right? The earth is here for millenniums above us all. The female that does that now, that replaced, what's his name back in the day, all right? That's how the Jacqueline Bassett's and the Kathleen Turners and all the big, well-known celebrity, if you will, female narrators, they understand how to create that dramatic, flatter type of read. They throw a little bit of what we call smokiness in the voice, a little bit silkiness, a little bit texturing. The same thing with the airiness of Robert Clotworthy. All right, according to ancient alien theories, he throws a little there's an airiness. Texturing is a whole nother thing that I train on. Texturing and the ability to use your mechanics and your jaws and all the nasals and everything. But in documentaries, we use it quite a bit more than people think. People will typically approach a documentary like the Maya, an ancient South American culture practiced that time would end in, right? Cliche, very straightforward type of read. An average voice talent would be the Maya, an ancient South American culture predicted that the world would end in apocalypse on December 21st, 2012. How's that, guys? Yeah, man, one more time. Good job. Let's send that off. He ain't gonna ever hear anything. Crickets, dead. No callback, no shortlist, no nothing. Versus somebody that knows how to paint it and knows how to deliver it. And I'm not trying to be it, but this is an example. The Maya, an ancient South American culture, predicted that time would end in a violent apocalypse on December 21st, 2012. Now, all I did without necessarily trying to be a real narrative, I created a little bit of something special. I slowed down. I used stalls. I was more dramatic. I allowed myself to paint a visual. Now, here's the key to documentaries. And this is that $1 million, hopefully golden nugget for all of you guys out there and girls listening is when we're doing documentaries, we're a supporting actor. We're not the actor. Promotionals, we're the actor. Educational, we're just equal to the viewer and the listener, all right? Explainers, we're the educator, the teacher, the explainer, the how to do stuff. They're relying upon us to how to do stuff, right? Audiobooks, we're all over the place. We're the entertainer, the actor, narrator, right? But in the documentary world, our key being in the documentary world is to be the supporting actor. We're not going to get the Oscar for leading actor. The visual, the story, the documentary, the history, whatever the content of that particular show is, that's the star. We're the supporting actor. You got to just deliver the goods. You got to deliver the performance. You got to deliver the lines, the dialogue, without trying to be the star. Like a old Baker Machado, who's on Cheddar now, was one of my students back in the teen radio days. I used to do teen radio shows. He used to go, "I'm the superstar. I'm going to be big someday." Well, now he's on Cheddar and he's doing pretty dang good. But he used to call himself the superstar. And I used to always tell him, dude, quit being the hot dog. Back down. You're upstage to all the other jocks. It's a talk show. I'm the superstar. No, you're not. Yes, I am. No, you're not. Quit being a hot dog. And right? Yep. So the point is, behind every great documentary is a narrator who understands how to necessarily step back and turn it off, but keep it on just enough so that you're still engaging and you're still retaining the viewer. And the key to all of these is developing the sound packs, developing the soundscape, developing the voice, the textures, the tempos, the flavor, the pitch, the whole thing that creates that sound, so that your technical read, the audiobook you're doing, the educational piece, the explainer piece, the documentary, all of them have a uniqueness about them, instead of what we all started at the very beginning of listening to what I said before this long tangent was, instead of being a one-dimensional, here's my narrator sound, man, what do you think, dude? Yeah, it sounds really good. You got a great mic. It sounds great, but guess what? Everything on your demo sounds like that. Guess what? Crickets. You got to have a narrative, if you will, demo that shows that you can carry all kinds of subgenres. not just, well, here's my, oh, that sounds just like the medical piece. Well, wait to hear my technical piece. That sounds just like the technical read. Well, my real estate piece is really good. Wait to hear it. You got to be a narrator who understands how to deliver a variety of sounds so that when you are sitting back and listening, and I challenge you all to go back to your own narrative auditions the last month, let's say, if you keep them like you should. And you go back and listen to them and play the first 4 or 5 seconds of each one. Just quickly, bang, 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 listen to a bunch of them, all right? I bet you if you are not doing what we're talking about today, they're going to all sound fairly the same. I challenge you to take a listen to all of them. And if you find to conclude that your documentary sounds the same, your explainers, your educational, your technical, your medical, your business, your finance, your automotive, whatever narrative stuff you've done, sound fairly within that one-dimensional area, and you aren't using all those other types of sounds and builds and registers and everything, then you need to reevaluate. Maybe I need to think about developing 6 primary narrative sub-genre styles so that I have my technical sound, I have my documentary sounds, I have my explainer, core sounds that you build from. And those are what they are. In conclusion, they are basically core sounds that you build, and then you can expand however way you need from that particular explainer sound. So that's kind of short and sweet as I can, my philosophy on how to go about approaching and challenging yourself to develop your 6 primary styles and see what you can put together on your own.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And yeah, like you said, it's kind of like developing, like if we were to put it back to an audio standpoint, like it's like developing 6 plugins, and then you tweak those plugins as you need based on the audition. Same thing goes for the read. You create those 6 plugin reads, and then you tweak them as you need based on the copy and the script.
Exactly what it said.
Yep. All righty. So I think that was fantastic information. I hope everybody really was able to pull something from that. And I saw a couple people in the chat. One individual who does lots of explainer work and, really connected with what you said there. The kind of that step-by-step explainer, really how much he's seen that in his experience in the industry. So